Did you know that a single British pen stroke in 1793 instantly transformed millions of free Indian farmers into mere tenants on their own ancestral lands? Lord Cornwallis introduced the permanent settlement, forever altering India's economic destiny. This was not a simple administrative reform. It was a ruthless strategy designed to extract maximum wealth from the subcontinent while cementing absolute colonial control over the fertile fields. For centuries, Indian peasants held traditional rights to cultivate their lands, sharing a portion of their harvest with local rulers. However, the British East India Company completely disrupted this ancient ecosystem. They demanded fixed, exorbitant cash payments, regardless of catastrophic droughts or devastating floods. This marked the beginning of an era of unprecedented agrarian distress, engineered poverty, and widespread systemic exploitation. To understand how India was impoverished, we must compare the two monstrous systems that carved up the nation, Zamindari and Ryotwari. One relied on powerful middlemen to squeeze the peasantry, while the other dealt directly with individual farmers, yet both shared the same insatiable hunger for revenue. Let us unravel the dark history of these colonial experiments that still shape modern South Asian inequality. Following the decisive Battle of Buxar in 1764, the East India Company secured the Diwani rights, which granted them absolute authority to collect revenues across Bengal, Bihar, and Odisha. Eager to secure a stable and predictable income stream, Lord Cornwallis implemented the permanent settlement of 1793. This system officially created the Zamindari class, turning tax collectors into powerful, hereditary landlords overnight. Meanwhile, in the southern and western provinces, British administrators faced a completely different socio-political landscape. Led by Thomas Munro and Alexander Reed, the colonial state realized that large-scale landlords did not exist in Madras and Bombay. Thus, they devised the Ryotwari System, establishing direct contracts with the individual peasant or riot, bypassing the traditional intermediaries to extract maximum revenue directly. These two distinct administrative approaches divided the Indian subcontinent into competing economic zones. The Zamindari system dominated the fertile eastern plains, while the Ryotwari system stretched across the dry, rugged Deccan plateau and southern regions. This geographical divide set the stage for two unique forms of exploitation, forever altering the relationship between the Indian farmer, the soil, and the state. Under the rigid Zamindari system, the state set a permanent, non-negotiable revenue demand. If a landlord failed to pay this fixed sum by sunset on the specified date, the colonial government immediately auctioned off his estate to the highest bidder. This brutal sunset law created an atmosphere of extreme panic, forcing zamindars to extract every single penny from their helpless, desperate tenant farmers. Conversely, the Ryotwari system seemed more scientific but proved equally devastating in practice. British surveyors assessed the soil quality and potential yield of every individual plot, setting revenue rates as high as 60% of the total estimate. Crucially, these rates were not permanent, they were revised upward every 30 years, ensuring that any agricultural improvement made by the farmer benefited the British treasury. Politically, the Zamindari system created a loyal class of wealthy Indian collaborators who defended British rule to protect their own privileges. Under Ryotwari, however, the British government itself became a giant, omnipresent landlord. There were no local intermediaries to buffer the state's demands, leaving individual peasants completely vulnerable to the direct, unyielding pressure of colonial revenue collectors and militarist police forces. Both systems forced a radical shift from traditional food crops to lucrative commercial cash crops like indigo, opium, cotton, and sugarcane. Because the British demanded revenue payments strictly in cash rather than grain, farmers had no choice but to cultivate commodities suited for global markets. This forced commercialization disrupted local food security, leaving millions of peasants highly vulnerable to international price fluctuations. To pay their exorbitant taxes on time, desperate farmers in both regions turned to local moneylenders. These usurious lenders charged astronomical interest rates, trapping entire generations of peasant families in endless cycles of debt bondage. When crops failed, moneylenders seized the land, leading to massive land alienation where ancestral fields passed into the hands of non-cultivating urban merchants and speculators. The economic drain was catastrophic, directly fueling some of the worst famines in human history. While British warehouse overflowed with exported grain and cash crops, millions of Indian peasants starved to death on their own fields. The rigid revenue demands were never suspended, even during severe ecological crisis, proving that colonial economic policy valued financial extraction far above human survival. The extreme oppression inherent in both land systems inevitably triggered violent agrarian resistance across the subcontinent. In Zamindari areas, peasants organized powerful rebellions against both the landlords and their British protectors. The Santhal rebellion of 1855 saw tribal communities armed with bows and arrows rise up against oppressive zamindars and colonial forces, demonstrating the deep-seated anger brewing in rural India. In the Ryotwari regions of the Deccan, the burden of debt eventually reached a violent boiling point. The Deccan riots of 1875 saw furious riots systematically targeting money lenders, burning debt bonds, and destroying account books. These uprisings forced the colonial government to realize that their aggressive revenue extraction policies were destabilizing the empire, prompting them to deploy heavy military forces to restore order. These widespread rebellions were not merely isolated incidents of lawlessness, they were desperate wars of survival. The colonial state responded with brutal military force, hanging rebel leaders and burning entire villages to the ground. Yet, these uprisings successfully shattered the myth of a peaceful, content peasantry, proving that the British land revenue systems had turned rural India into a volatile powder keg. Although India gained independence in 1947 and officially abolished the Zamindari system, the structural scars of colonial land policy persist today. Decades of unequal land distribution created deep-seated class and caste divisions that modern land reforms have failed to fully resolve. In many regions, the descendants of colonial landlords still hold massive political power and economic dominance over landless laborers. Similarly, the legacy of the Ryotwari system lives on in India's ongoing agrarian crisis. The modern state's bureaucratic approach to land records, taxation, and agricultural loans directly mirrors colonial administrative frameworks. Today's smallholder farmers still struggle with high debt burdens, volatile market pricing, and lack of direct state support, leading to tragic cycles of farmer suicides across former Ryotwari territories. Understanding these colonial revenue systems is essential for analyzing modern India's economic landscape. The geographic disparities in development, literacy, and agricultural productivity between eastern and southern India can be traced directly back to these 19th century administrative choices. The ghosts of Cornwallis and Munro continue to influence how land is owned, taxed, and cultivated in 21st century South Asia. The story of Zamindari and Ryotwari is not just ancient history, it is the blueprint of how modern economic inequality was engineered. By turning land into a commodity and human beings into tax-producing assets, the British Empire systematically drained India's wealth. This historical exploitation laid the foundation for the complex challenges that continue to plague South Asian agriculture and rural society today. If we wish to solve the modern agrarian crisis, we must first understand the historical roots of the problem. We must ask ourselves, has the relationship between the farmer and the state truly changed, or have we simply replaced colonial rulers with modern corporate and bureaucratic systems? The struggle for land rights, fair pricing, and dignity for cultivators remains an ongoing battle. What do you think is the best way to support India's struggling farmers today? Share your thoughts in the comments below, like this video to help spread historical awareness, and subscribe for more deep dives into history. Thank you for watching, and let us keep questioning the structures that shape our world. Together, we can uncover the truth behind history.